I think we'll get started.
All right, everybody.
Good morning. Go ahead, Ann.
Go ahead.
We're so excited to get started. We both want to talk. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Allison Manley, the Director of Marketing here at Canopy Studios. And today we're hosting this webinar just for you UCSF folks about website terms and definitions that you need to know and learn. As many of you know, Canopy designs, builds, and supports websites for clients who want to make a positive impact. And a bit about our host today, Ann Stefanik. She is the founder and CEO of Canopy. She helps create clarity around project needs and turns conversations into actionable outcomes. She really enjoys helping clients identify their problems and then empowering the Canopy team to execute great solutions. She's also an advocate for open source and co-organizes the Bay Area Drupal Camp, which is coming up. So if you want to sign up for that, please go to that website. And what is the website?
Badcamp.org. You can go and it'll redirect you to 2020.badcamp.org. And it's totally free to attend. And there's also some really affordable training classes.
Great, thank you. Reminder that there is a Q&A button at the bottom there of your Zoom screen. So at any time throughout the presentation, if you have a question for Ann, please enter it there. And when she's hit the end of her presentation, we will address all the questions. Presentation's only about 15 minutes, so there'll be some time left over. And from here, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Ann.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to connect with you. I've been working with UCSF for a long time, and it's a real honor to present today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And again, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's my QR code. You can do that. Just let me know where you're coming from. And as Allison said, that we really work with clients to help them make an impact with your website. We believe your website should look better at 10 years than it did at your website should last 10 years and it really should look better at year 3 than it did on launch day. So we've worked with UCSF since 2013, and since it's our mission to make websites easy to understand and effective, we wanted to offer some mini trainings to help power up our cohorts over at UCSF. All right, let's dive in. We've had various summer series throughout the summer, and gosh, it is September now. So we've got 2 left, which is including today. And then we'll also have one more in 2 weeks about reorganizing your navigation by Jim Birch. So be sure to click on that link. That will also have all the resources. Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to just be covering some quick general terms, talk a little bit about Drupal stuff, and then go into the Q&A. Okay, so let's take a quick poll here. So I'm going to launch the poll here. And I'm just curious, we'll do this for real quick, is where's your comfort zone when it comes to working with websites? Are you new to web content management? Have you been working with websites for a while? Or are you a developer? So we'll leave this poll open just so we can get a sense of who's in the room. Cool. Okay, we have 1 developer on the phone, so that's awesome. You can definitely help with my Q&A. But good, we have a good distribution of people here. So looks like 36% of you are brand new to web content management, 59% have been working with websites for a while, and 5% or 1 person is a developer. So thank you so much for voting. We'll go on and continue along. Okay. So the good thing is that it's okay not to know everything. I was very confused with Drupal and back in the day, but little by little and with the help of my community, trust me that it will make sense over time. So let's jump into some general terms. First off, what is a content management system or a CMS? And really that's software that helps users create, manage, and modify content on a website without needing specialized technical knowledge. Drupal is the CMS of choice at UCSF, but there are other content management systems like WordPress or Craft. But we love Drupal most for its power, flexibility, and extensibility. So what's open source? Open source at the simplest level is code that other people can use freely and modify. Since it's free to use, there's no licensing fees or what's called non-proprietary, and open source relies on the community contributing back their code. As we say, use Drupal and you will stand on the shoulders of giants. Another common term you'll hear in the web world is search engine optimization, or SEO. And SEO simply means the process of improving your site to increase its visibility for relevant searches. Organic SEO are how pages are indexed based on keywords, location, and domain authority, which is that greenish circle there. And then paid SEO are paid search terms or ads, which is in that red oval. So you may see that, and what you want to do is focus on certain elements on your website so that you get to be on that natural organic search results. To do that, there's a couple of different things that you'll learn about. First off is there's things called backlinks. Backlinks are also called inbound links or incoming links, and they're essentially creating a link from one website to another. Backlinks are valuable for SEO because they represent a vote of confidence from one site to another. For example, if your department is known for world-class pediatric oncology and there's a news article published in a major newspaper or medical journal, you'll want to link that article to have a link back to your site, and you'll want your site to have a link to that article. That's the SEO juice that will further your rankings as a world-class pediatric oncologist. Another key component of search engine optimization is what are called meta tags. So meta tags are simply snippets of text that describe a page's content. The meta tags don't actually appear on the page itself, but in the source code. It's one of the most basic elements of SEO. Now, metadata simply is data about data. So if you think about it, the meta tag is the room, and then the metadata is the contents of the room. And in your metadata, that you want to ensure you have your keywords. So again, if you are a pediatric oncologist, you'll want to be able to put some of those keywords in that meta tag. Okay, let's talk a little bit about usability. So first off, a common term you're going to hear is called below the fold. And below the fold refers to a web page that a user must scroll to see. This is a holdover from newspaper publishing when the term was actually, coined with the actual physical fold in the middle of the page. But know that most designers still agree that that fold on desktop is about 1,000 pixels wide and 600 pixels tall. Data indicates that placement of content above the fold dramatically increases the likelihood of it being viewed. So know that the first part of your web page is the most powerful, and what you put there is really important. For some reason, people still love using carousels, and it's not always a battle that we win as web designers, but know that carousels aren't always accessible, and they often make your user think that's something you are not. For example, a lot of people, since they don't scroll, if you just put all events in your carousel, sometimes people think that all you do is run events, and they will never actually know the valuable services that you actually provide. Another common usability term is called an accordion. An accordion is a perfect way to make content-heavy pages appear less so. So it's really made up of multiple items with usually a header and a title with a body that content expands and contracts, just like an accordion. This gives you a chance to get creative with design and add some animation. For example, these can be used for FAQs, or what's called frequently asked questions, expanded profile data, or let's say you offer a lot of services and want to list them but not overwhelm the user. It's a great usability trick. Another way is to help people guide to different parts to your site is using what's called an anchor text. An anchor text essentially is a clickable word that will link you to another web page or even somewhere else on the page. It's usually blue, but it is whatever color your links are on your website. Okay, caching. You may have heard this. Simply, caching is hardware or software that takes a snapshot of the information and serves that as a picture. So Drupal, for example, the way it works is a database. So instead of having to query the database each time, a caching system allows the query to be once, and then the image is shown. This really helps with performance, which ultimately helps with SEO, and Google really likes sites that go fast. So it's a common thing you'll hear from your developer. When changes are made, sometimes the server or the browser has a cached version, which means you'll have to go and clear your cache. You can directly do that through your browser. You go through your settings where you go and you clear your cookies and you clear your cache there. There's also your developer can also clear your cache in your Drupal site. And usually that's when you've made a change, you've submitted a ticket, the work set has been done, but you still don't see it on your computer. That's caching. Okay, domain versus URL versus a subdomain. So first off, a domain is your primary root domain of your website versus a subdomain is part of the primary domain. And the URL, or what's called a universal resource locator, is actually where you can find certain pages. So to give an example, ucsf.edu is the domain for the entire university. A subdomain is websites.ucsf.edu. And a URL could be any of those, but an example would be like websites.ucsf.edu/frequently-asked-questions. So again, pretty much all you're ever going to need to know is what your URL is, but it's good to know the difference, what is a domain versus a subdomain. Another thing that often confuses people is what's a server versus a hosting provider. So a server really is a piece of software or hardware that provides a service to the devices on the network. It's usually a hard machine that runs, and it can run both websites as well as applications. It can also run a bunch of other things like phone services. Versus a hosting provider is specifically running internet servers, allowing you individuals to connect to the internet. For example, at UCSF, Acquia is your hosting provider. So when you talk to ITS about where am I going to host my site, it will always be on Acquia. And what they use is they use a LAMP stack server, which is just the configuration of that server. LAMP stands for Linux Operating System, Apache Web Server, MySQL database, and the PHP programming language, which is Drupal. You don't need to know any of that. All you need to know is that UCF sites are hosted on Acquia on the cloud. So what's the cloud? So the cloud, in simplest terms, means storing and accessing data and programs over the internet instead of your computer's hard drive. Ultimately, the cloud is just a metaphor for the internet. Okay, let's get a little nerdy here. So what's backend versus front end? So first off, backend is where PHP and other server-side languages are written. Backend includes custom modules, automated tests, and deployment automation. The front end is more focused on the user. It's focused on design, behavior, usability, and management. Okay, for example, unless you're a Drupal developer, you will never need to see or worry about the back end. With regards to the front end, half the time the developer or designer will be doing that work, but the other half is up to you as the content manager. So you may have control over various inputs such as usability, accessibility, and content management. Okay, let's talk a little bit about code. You've heard me say PHP a few times. PHP is a general purpose scripting language that's really well suited to web development. PHP originally stood for personal homepage, but it now stands for the recursive initialism PHP hypertext preprocessor. Kind of nerdy, don't really need to know about it, but that's what it is. And so you know, PHP powers over 50% of the internet websites. PHP runs Drupal, Facebook, WordPress, and many other applications. Okay, what's the difference between HTML versus CSS? I found this one pretty confusing at first, but then I thought, you know, now it's like peanut butter and jelly, two different things that go really well together. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which is used to create the actual content of the page, such as written text. If you think about it, it's the structure. It's like the firmness of the peanut butter. And I'm talking natural peanut butter, not the Kraft kind. And then we've got CSS, and CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and that's responsible for the visual style of the website, including layout and visual effects and background color. So it's kind of like the jam or the jelly. You can have all kinds of colors and tastes. Can you restate front end versus back end? Are the different developers who specialize in these areas? I'm going to take this question live and just let you know that yes. So front end is all your front end visual components. And backend is much more on server side of and backend module development. There are developers who are specialized in either. So often that's why people end up hiring a firm to work with them, is because they have both specialties on staff. Great question. Okay. JavaScript. You've probably heard a lot of JavaScript out there right now, and there's different frameworks. We can talk about them at the end, but generally JavaScript is a text-based programming language that allows you to make web pages interactive. So where HTML and CSS are languages that give structure and style, JavaScript gives those pages interactive elements. If you kind of think of it, it's like making that peanut butter and jelly sandwich move towards your mouth. Okay. HTTP versus HTTPS, and that little s is really important. So HTTP is a protocol for transferring data over the World Wide Web. Essentially, it tells the servers where to put things. Sadly, HTTP is not secure. So HTTP is the commonly used protocol. What it does is it uses SSL, which is a secure socket layer. It's something usually that you purchase with your domain. Because you work with ITS, you just contact them. They'll always use HTTPS. But what it does is it encrypts those requests, scrambles them, and sends them over to the other server, and then it unscrambles them. It's really important that you always make sure your site is running on HTTPS. I'm sure you've been to a website before where it came up and it says, this browser or this connection is unsecure. Do you want to trust this or go on? That means the site is running over HTTP. So it's really important that you run your site on HTTPS, because Google's going to penalize you, as well as users will not visit your site if it's not secure. Okay, what is an htaccess file? So htaccess is essentially just that little pop-up that password protects your site, so it prevents it from being indexed. Most often this is used on a development environment, and this essentially, it's a file that configures how your server responds, which a lot of the time is either just like saying, hey, internet, you can't see this yet. So this is a common thing that when you're working on your development environment, you will have, if you don't already have other settings that's blocking it from getting indexed on Google. Because Google will actually penalize you for duplicate content. So if you have your development site and your live site and they're both getting indexed by Google, they likely have the same content, and it's going to, give you a negative score. Plus, nobody wants you to find your development environment online. Okay, part of being a developer means that you use Git, and Git is a version control system for tracking code during development. It's really designed for programmers and allowing developers to work together, and if they commit code at the same time, they can then manage the conflicts. Often you'll hear a term called GitHub. GitHub is the service provider that leverages Git as an open source tool. There's other open source tools for version control, but Git is the most common one. You may have also heard your developer call a repo. So a repo or repository is in a version control system like Git. And essentially what it does is it hosts the code source together with various metadata. So if you think about it, Git or GitHub is the house, and the repo or the repository is the various rooms, and the metadata, again, is stuff in those rooms, which is the specific code that is being developed. All right, let's rock and roll and head over to some Drupal-y world. Drupal has the funniest words. Like a lot of these things, once you hear them, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Drupal, sometimes yes, sometimes no. The most obvious thing in Drupal is what's called a content type. And a content type simply is a piece of content. They're really the building blocks for structuring authored content in Drupal. So this is from the Department of Pathology. They have common course content types include like news and faculty. And these ones here are where you usually go into your Drupal site and you drop down create content, and then you create news, and you'd be able to put in your picture and your headline and your quotes and so forth, all within that content structure. That's then pulled into a view. And a view essentially is a listing of content. So this is from the Department of Urology, and this is a full page of news articles. That would be a view of news articles. So here, news is the content type and the view is a listing of news. A template. This is something that's used very commonly, but a template essentially is a pre-made web page or a set of web pages that can be customized. And templates usually include all of what is needed, including the HTML and CSS and JavaScript we talked about, but it also may include other code, which is built out of modules for it to function. Speaking of modules, modules are essentially packets of code that are collected together to perform a certain set of functionality. It sometimes is PHP or JavaScript or those CSS files to kind of extend the site features. This is the beauty of open source. Drupal has a ton of modules, which that means the community has built those modules and contributed it back. So for example, that meta tag that we talked about, there's actually a meta tag module that you can put into your site, so it allows you to add meta tags really easily. That's the beauty of Drupal. Those modules really give us the power to which we can build amazing sites with. Another common word is a block. A block is essentially boxes of content that can be displayed in different regions on your site, the sidebar or the footer. So on this example, this is on the School of Nursing site. On their news page, they have a block to call out an upcoming event. All right, the last Drupal-y thing, which I always found really confusing. So what's an entity versus a node? So an entity essentially is a piece of data that's on your website. It can be extended with different fields onto it. And a node essentially is any piece of content. So this could be a poll, an article, a forum post. The funny thing is an entity can be almost anything on the site, like a taxonomy term or a user or you know, a piece of content, versus a node is just a piece of content. So a node can't be a user. A node can't be a taxonomy. A node is definitely a poll or a forum topic or a blog entry. Okay, so there are many more terms. We can explore many other terms like a pattern library or anything more Drupal-y, but remember, in the end, your end users will actually have no clue what any of this is, and they don't need to know. But as you folks that are, you know, new to web development or, you know, have been working with the web development for a while, it's good to know some of these terms so you actually know what the nerds are talking about. All right, everybody, we'll pause for questions there. And just before, I'll leave this here as well so that you folks can click on that link and sign up for the next term. And then also know you can visit that after. So, okay.
All right, are there any questions? All right, well, I have a question, Anne. What is the difference between a Drupal custom module and a Drupal contributed module?
Sure. So a custom module is one that usually your development team does from scratch. So that's when they've defined that, hey, when we look out to the Drupal landscape, a contributed module is one that's built in the community. So if the community, you look and say, oh, there's nothing out there that does that functionality, then only at that point usually do you develop a custom module. And if you're a good open sourcer, then you actually contribute it back over to the open source world so other people can leverage your code. Okay, accessibility, that's a good question. So accessibility is how someone can actually perceive your website, and that doesn't just come from, you know, visual or hearing impairments, but there's also things that some people are, you know, like a woman or with a small child on a bus that wants to look something up on the phone, having closed captions on a video that's training them about something will also be, you know, really important too from an accessibility standpoint. And we've already done a few things on accessibility, so we've got tons of resources out there. I believe there is a lab that's happening today. Jill Walters is definitely a wonderful resource when it comes to accessibility.
Okay, we have another question. Is there a way to optimize SEO without paying for it?
Yes, there is. what you want to do is you want to focus on quality content, okay? So a really important thing is Google likes real sites. So updating your content regularly. And what you can always do is there are some tools out there like SEO Moz and even like there's keyword checkers that you can go ahead and check your page to see what level of keywords that you have on your site. Generally, you also, Google pays a lot of attention to speed. It pays a lot of attention to localization. So for example, if your department has a physical location, whether you're there or not right now, it's really important to put that right on your website. Another thing that you can do is you can work with Google and go in and optimize your location page. So you can go onto Google and claim your location. Unfortunately, Google doesn't actually want to send people to your site. They want to keep them on Google. So you may have noticed now when you do a Google search, let's say you search for like plumbers San Francisco, you're going to notice that there's a whole bunch of listings that are already there and they show their ratings, they show everything. So ways that you can go ahead and optimize your SEO is go and claim your business or your organization on Google and then ask your patients, your students, alumni, faculty to go and give ratings. So that's a great way to boost your SEO. And again, it creates that kind of link juice. Great question.
Great. I love the term link juice. All right. So if we don't have any other questions, we're going to give this a wrap. I'm going to be sending out the recording and the deck of this webinar within the next few days, certainly by the end of this week. And plus, I did drop in the chat that I've created a landing page where I've put all the resources from every webinar we've done so far, in case you've missed any of the other ones or you want to go back and just research something again, all the recordings, links, any document that our panelists have included in their presentations are all linked there. So that website is canopy.com/UCSF-canopy. And of course, as a reminder, Canopy would love to help you with your website if you need it. So please email us at hello@canopy.com. And that's it for this Wednesday. Hopefully we'll see you 2 Wednesdays from now for the very last one. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yes, and please come to the Bay Area Drupal Camp. That's bad camp, badcamp.org. Lots of great content. There's actually a higher education summit there that's specifically focused for high ed folks. John Keeley from UCSF ITS is running it, so I'm sure he'd love to see your face. Everything is virtual, so you can just join that way, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Have a wonderful and safe afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.